the United States, many look at health as the absence of illness or disease, and that is largely linked to access to medical or clinical care. And people often view poor health as related to individual behavior choices. And I think as public health practitioners, we know that it's more complex than that. This week, we are going to focus on social determinants of health and their role in health outcomes.
I really like the World Health Organization's definition of health. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I took this graphic from the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, and I think it nicely depicts how various influences in our environment and access to various resources or lack of access can affect our health. Things such as high quality education, nutritious food, decent and safe housing, affordable public transportation, culturally sensitive healthcare providers, health insurance, clean water, non polluted air, all those factors play an important role in our health. As we continue on, and in the context of the socioecological framework, we recognize that there are multiple factors outside of health behavior and genetics that influence health outcomes. From an ecological perspective, communities where individuals and families live, play, and work influence individual health risks and outcomes. And these conditions are known as social determinants of health. And I took this quote from Dr. Thomas Frieden, the former director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. When it comes to health in this country, your longevity and health are more determined by your zip code than they are by your genetic code. Along those same lines, this is the California Endowment website. If you live in California, you can go to this website and enter your address, and it'll tell you your life expectancy. If you don't live in California, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, their website also has this same option. This I came across in one of the books I'm reading for this class. It's just an example using the Titanic as an illustration of how social determinants can influence health. So lifeboats were loaded by class and deck, and despite the same exposure, first class passengers fared much better than their counterparts. So this is just an extreme example of how social determinants can influence health. So a lot of research is being done in this area, and recent reviews have documented links between social factors and health and included possible causal pathways. So among these broad and varying types of social factors, some important health outcomes are linked to income, wealth, educational attainment, occupation, and social inequality based on racial or ethnic groups. Extensive evidence documents the association between income and mortality. Unhealthy behaviors such as smoking tend to be more common in low-income groups. Income or wealth enables individuals to afford nutritious foods or buy or rent housing in healthy, safe neighborhoods. And also it allows people to engage in regular exercise, either through gym memberships or living where it's safe and pleasant to exercise outdoors. These are just a few examples. Also, of course, access to employment and medical care depends on one's income, wealth, and whether or not they have a steady job. Education and health are strongly interrelated as well. Just to give you one statistic to illustrate this, in 2006, the life expectancy of a 25-year-old American man without a high school diploma was 9.3 years shorter than those with a bachelor's degree, and the corresponding disparity for women was 8.6 years. Also, early childhood experiences and education shape early childhood development, and that in turn influences school readiness and ultimately educational attainment. And parental education is also associated with health behaviors in children. Now, employment shapes health in a variety of ways. As you can imagine, many low-paying jobs don't even offer health insurance, and low-skilled and low-status employment, for instance, agricultural work. Individuals that work in that area are more likely to be exposed to physical hazards such as toxic chemicals, like pesticides, or cleaning solvents, or even be more likely to endure an occupational injury. So all of this is related to health, obviously. In many countries, a variety of health outcomes vary drastically by race and ethnicity, and of course, including the United States. In the United States, this is very clear. These health disparities often mirror large differences in income, wealth, education, occupation, and neighborhood conditions among people of different races and ethnicities. And these differences often reflect a long history of discrimination. So, these health effects and histories of racism and discrimination in turn cause stress, and that stress has been linked to all different types of health issues, including smoking and hypertension. And it's a result not only from having directly experienced discrimination, but also the constant stress and fear of whether harmful incidents will occur to themselves or their families. There's also something being talked a lot about in public health, which is something called the life course perspective. So, research is increasingly confirming that health is shaped by social factors that individuals have faced across their entire life courses, not just current or recent experiences. So, Healthy People 2020 defines a health disparity as a particular type of health difference that is closely linked with social, economic, and or environmental disadvantage. Health disparities are differences in health outcomes, presence of disease, or access to health care between populations. And these differences are often among race or ethnicity, sex, sexual identity, age, disability, socioeconomic status, and geographic locations. Another common way in which people describe social determinants of health and health disparities and inequities is looking at upstream determinants versus downstream. So, upstream determinants of public health are those overarching factors that are largely outside of the control of the individual, and they might have trickle down effects on other more close proximal determinants of public health. So much in the same way that pollution upstream of a river will have lasting effects on those populations downstream, despite these populations having little to no control over this pollution. So conversely, downstream determinants of public health are kind of seen as the outcomes of up and midstream factors and variables. And this chart comes from the Richmond, California website, which I think better illustrates the point I'm trying to make. So these are some graphics that I pulled from Healthy People 2020 infographics, and I think they nicely illustrate some key health disparities. And I suggest you go to the site and kind of study them for yourself versus looking at them on the slide because they're not as clear as I had hoped them to be. This one is depicting education. So again, we know that lower educational levels are associated with lower income, and many of the leading causes of death in the United States are more common among racial and ethnic minorities with limited education or low incomes. This one is showing, that independent of personal choices made by individuals, health status is also influenced by the social conditions in which we live. Individuals and families often have limited control over these environmental health risks and are also vulnerable to the choices made by communities, industries, and policymakers. So this is showing exposure to secondhand smoke for children between the ages of 3 and 11 years by race and ethnicity. Infant death is often a critical indicator of the health of a population. It reflects the overall state of maternal health as well as accessibility to quality primary care available for pregnant women and infants. So in this graphic, you can see that the infant mortality rate experienced by infants born to Black non-Hispanic mothers was more than 2.5 times the rate of infants born to Asian or Pacific Islander mothers. So just pause for a moment and think about what some of the factors might be that create that very devastating health disparity. Social determinants of health are mostly responsible for health inequities, and health inequities are defined as unfair and avoidable differences in health status seen within and between countries. This is from the World Health Organization. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation defines health equity as the principle or value that motivates us to eliminate health disparities. So health equity can be viewed both as a process, the process of reducing disparities in health and its determinants, and as an outcome, the ultimate goal, which is the elimination of social disparities in health and its determinants. So for this week, we focused on social determinants of health in the United States. And I just want to point out that health status in developing countries is more profoundly influenced by social determinants of health. And if you're interested in this, the World Health Organization has excellent resources, publications, and reports at their website. And these are the references I used for this week's brief lecture.